We moved to the house when I was 5 years old. Suburban England. The previous owner was an elderly man, 70s, who cared for his mother, 100s, in the home until she died in the downstairs room, which my parents converted to a dining room. He was a deeply religious man too, and donated to every church within a 10-mile radius. My parents still get begging letters 26 years later, asking for more money from the churches to ensure his place is in heaven. This house, though, something was definitely in there with us. Me and my younger brother, for my 20 years in the house at least, repeatedly experienced things well beyond my reasoning. I'm an aerospace engineer, extremely scientifically minded, and reasoned in everything that I come across. I try to explain everything with science, and my brother, being a teacher, always had the mindset for theory-based practicality too. If there was no theory, it just couldn't be real. My first memories are around 6 or 7 years old, and this specific one would be ever present until around 11. So, my parents used to make me sleep with the door open so they could check up on me easily. Every night, though, I would wake up and there was a shadow in the hallway. It didn't watch me or didn't seem interested in me, but it was just ever present. In a dark unit hallway, a person-shaped outline was darker than the rest of it, and I used to hide under my covers until I could just drift off to sleep. But then, when I was 11, I had enough, and eventually I closed the door on it, and I never had trouble again. I'm now 30 with a family, and I have a crippling fear of sleeping with any door open in case I see it. The TVs in the house always behaved weird too when we were a family and we would come home from a family outing. Almost as if we were being welcomed in or something. We would walk in the door, and whichever room we went into first, the television would switch on and display static. This was in the mid-90s to early 2000s, when we had 5 channels and big boxes on the back of the TV. It was absolutely absurd, but in the end we just got used to it. Then, as TVs developed, we got a flat screen, and this thing just never occurred again. Not until later on, at least, but that's coming up. Now, this is one of my brothers, and 18 years later, he still swears by it. I was 12 and he was 8. He was looking for my mother and saw her in the dining room, sat looking out the window on the stool that is normally in the corner, wearing a grey shawl, and her normally blonde hair was straw-like now. He called to her, "Mum," but there was no reply. He walked in and prodded her in the back, as a clumsy 8-year-old would, when needing attention, and he says that her head turned around 180 degrees, while her body faced the window still, and she was grotesquely old, and not my mum at all. He screamed and ran out of the room. This is where me and my mum heard the commotion, screaming and thumping as he ran into the chairs and the table trying to get away, and we found him hiding in the downstairs toilet, crying his eyes out. It was around the same time as this too. I was 12-ish, and it was just me, Mum, and my brother at home, whilst my dad was at the pub. We were all asleep, and I'd spent the whole day taking bricks from the garden and storing them in the loft. It was to get them out of the way whilst we renovated the garden. It was around midnight when I was woken up by the loudest banging in the loft that I'd ever heard. My mum had also been woken by it. We thought that all the bricks had been knocked over by a squirrel or something that had gotten in. Terrified, though, my mum still forced me to go and take a look in the loft. We didn't have a ladder available, so I got on her shoulders and took a torch and looked around. But when I looked up there, nothing had fallen. Nothing was out of place. It had honestly sounded like something in a horror movie when all is tense and quiet, and suddenly just somebody hammers on the front door with force, making everybody jump. It was that kind of sound, but there was nothing there. Fast forward to 17, and my parents had gone away for a week with my brother, so I stayed home alone. I was sat on my computer in my room playing Football Manager 2005 and heard my dad call my name. Then my brother called my name, and it sounded urgent, as if something was happening and I needed to help them. I came out of my room and I shouted, "What?" but there was no response. I got to the top of the stairs when I realized that I was home alone and they were all on holiday. I had a girlfriend at the time. This was our first time alone together and a chance to lose the V card, if you catch my drift. We were on the sofa, cuddling and kissing and fondling. when suddenly there was a loud bang from the kitchen next door. I checked it to find the pin board, which had been a permanent fixture since we moved in, was now on the floor. Thinking that the wind must have blown it, there were no windows open, which was strange. I just went back up and back to losing my virginity. But no, back in the living room, we're getting it on, and another bang, this time followed by absolutely booming footsteps, as if somebody had steel boots on, up the stairs and a door slammed shut. And it was at this point that we absolutely shat ourselves, thinking that we have a break-in, so I get her to call the police and I go up to check. She has no phone signal at all. I check the kitchen and the calendar is now on the floor, and I head upstairs and every single door was open. Now, when my parents left, all the doors were closed other than mine, and the bathroom to show to not to go in there. Every single door, though, was now open, even the cupboards. She had gone for the house phone now, which was also oddly disconnected, no service, which really freaked us out. But I put the calendar back up in the kitchen, grabbed our shoes, and we just ran out of the house, and we went about 200 meters away until we got phone service again, called her mum to come and pick her up, and I went back and found the calendar on the floor again. And after that, she never came back round again. Age 22 now, I've moved out and lived on an RAF base for about 14 months, I think. In a 200-year-old building, I was put in the west wing alone, whilst everybody else was in the east wing. And now, the place was pretty well kept, but zero internet reception or mobile signal, and the only port was for an old schoolbox TV antenna. I took the one from home, left it in the loft for some 15 years at this point. I was dating the girl who was now my wife, and she recalls this just as well as me. She was home, but every night for 2 straight weeks, I woke up, wide awake as if I'd been well rested. I would look at my clock, and it was always 3 a.m. on the dot. It was literally every night for about 14 straight days as well. And on the final night that I woke up at 3 a.m., suddenly there was a noise. 2 people talking in my room. I was so shocked that I immediately jumped up, but when I did, nothing was there. But the noise was from the blank screen TV, and this TV had been unplugged while I moved things around and not put back in. I didn't listen to what it was saying, but I got up and I walked towards it, when suddenly the static came on, which made me jump back a bit, and the TV said the words loudly, "It's fine," and then just turned off. Nothing happened again, and I never woke up again at 3 a.m. at the base, and never experienced a thing there after that. Age 27, me and my wife moved into a temporary flat before we moved into our current house. It was 12 apartments with 1 immigrant family, the rest unoccupied. We were only there for 6 months, but some of the things that I experienced mentally have just scarred me. I'll only mention 5 of them. The first, my partner was in the bath and myself in the living room just watching TV. I heard her shout my name, so I came to the door and I asked what she wanted. She denied calling me. Her voice was from the opposite side of the bathroom, at least 10 steps from the door, and I said to her, "Are you okay? Do you need anything while I'm here anyway?" And it was at this point that I hear the lock sliding open while she says on the other side of the bathroom, "No, I'm fine." Then the door opens and she's lying in the bath and she asks how I got in. We were both puzzled, but then we hear her shout my name from the living room where I originally was. I quickly went in there, but when I got there, nothing was there. We did Halloween at my flat, and one of my friends slept over in the lounge. In the night, he texted me, "Why were you banging on the wall above my head all night? You kept me awake." He didn't realize that the wall that he was sleeping against wasn't the one against my room, though, in which I was fast asleep, mind you, but the one for the hallway. Now, the third is a minor incident, but my brother was sleeping over while the wife was at her parents'. I had a dream that I was in the flat and walking around, but it was cold, like really cold. And elsewhere, I could hear somebody calling for help. Like somewhere else in the flat, I kept hearing help. I walked into the living room and my brother was lying there, awake, just staring at me. In my dream, of course. And then he called my name. Eventually, I was woken up and he was actually calling my name, so I walked in the room and he was sat looking in the same direction that I had dreamt. And he told me that he was woken up by footsteps walking around the flat, and then he was looking and they were coming towards him, so he called me to wake up and check. Another incident where my wife was getting out of the bathroom. I thought that I would be cheeky and that I would hide in the living room and jump out at her and scare her. I heard the door open, footsteps come down the hallway, and her shadow come down the hallway too. I must admit, though, that it did look a bit off because it just didn't look like a human, if that's the right word. It seemed like a woman with like a long bird beak, similar to those ancient plague masks, moving along without any bodily movement like walking. I was kind of freaked out, so I gave up my plan and looked around my flat to find out why my wife's shadow looked that way. Maybe having a drink or maybe a towel or something. But when I did, I couldn't find her. So I went back to the bathroom and she was still in the shower. So whose shadow was that? Most terrifying for me, though, was I was lying in bed alone at about 9 p.m. and I rolled over and there was just a woman in the corner of the room. A white figure about 7 feet in the air, and I know this because the face was above the doorframe. It was looking right at me and I felt completely threatened, as if this thing did not like me at all. It was so clear too that I could even make out the facial features. Then it started drifting directly at me, downwards towards me in the bed, and then it vanished as it got about 2 feet away from my face. Obviously, I absolutely crapped myself. I screamed so loud that my wife came running in, and I just slept under the covers with a lamp on for about 3 months after that, and couldn't be alone in that room. If I came home from work, I would just run and close the door before I could see anything until she came home from work too. Another incident, a little bit freaky in that flat, was that I was talking in my sleep, but a full conversation that I have no memory of. It woke my wife up, and she asked what I was doing, and I turned to her and said something along the lines of, "They're here with us." And then I just laid down and I went back to sleep. I moved into my new house after my granddad died, and it was his that I purchased off his children, and ever since then, nothing has happened. This was at my boyfriend's house, where I've never felt a presence or any sort of energy at all, so I've never believed his house to be haunted or anything like that. In the early hours of the morning, I woke up though, and I just laid there while I tried to get back to sleep. I sleep on the far side of the bed, next to the wall, and my boyfriend sleeps on the side closer to the door because he generally gets up more throughout the night. I heard the floor creak and footsteps to the door, so I assumed he was getting up to use the bathroom, but I didn't hear the door open or any other noise of him getting back into bed. After a few more minutes of not being able to sleep, I sat up to take a drink and I looked over towards the door to see somebody standing in the corner next to it. I stared for a while and I can just feel eyes staring back at me too, although it's too dark to really make out the detail. Thinking my boyfriend was perhaps sleepwalking or something had distracted him on his way to the bathroom, I asked him what he was doing, while looking directly at the figure. And immediately I hear my boyfriend, next to me in bed, say, "Huh?" in response. This obviously startles me. I was sure that he was the one standing in the corner. I look back and I can still see the figure in the dark. For reference, the room is fairly small and the figure is close, but it's dark and I can't make out specific features. My boyfriend is not a believer in anything paranormal, so I don't push him in his half-asleep state. I just say something weird is happening and put my head under the covers, childish, yes I know, and hope the figure just goes away. Sometime later I look back and the figure is gone, and eventually I just get back to sleep. I believe that this is the most vivid paranormal experience that I've had, with absolutely no doubt to me that there truly was a presence in that room. I know it wasn't a dream too because my boyfriend remembers everything that was said that night. But where could this presence have come from? Could it have attached to me or just passing through the house or something? It definitely appeared to be masculine, but I didn't particularly feel threatened or anything, just really surprised by the clarity of the figure. I have no idea what it was and where it came from, but I sure hope that it doesn't come back. I think that I should probably start this by telling you that I live in a pretty rural area. I live with my younger brother and my dad, and it's not literally farmland or anything, but it's a small town in Scotland by the sea. And typically, not much goes amiss around here, except for drunk people regularly getting rescued from the large hill with a large amount of steep drops that they felt inclined to climb in the pitch dark. But apart from that, it's just a pretty quiet place. A nice place, in fact. But now, I'm paranoid as all hell. So somebody knocked hard on the door at night, like real hard, startled me out of my sleep, and at first I was thinking that I'd slept in and it was the post and I did nothing. I just thought that my dad would get it, or probably for him anyways. But then they knocked again, and it was then that I realized that everybody else was asleep and it was still dark outside. They knocked again and then again, and now I'm sure that it's got to be the police or something like that. It has to be. There's another knock, and then they try the handle. The door isn't locked too, so I can't take it anymore. I'm up out of bed with clothes on and reaching for the handle myself. I know, probably not the smartest thing to do, being as young as I was and a female. But I was still not totally awake and absolutely terrified that someone was going to come into our house or something, rob it whilst I was laying awake. So I, a 17-year-old girl, very carefully opened the door. And there he is, the guy. He's wearing a grey puffer jacket with a jumper underneath, I think. If I remember correctly, he's got glasses on his face, sort of half bald. He says hi, and I reply with a hello, and I'm not quite scared just yet because I've still only been up for a few minutes, but looking back on it now, I have no idea why I wasn't immediately compelled to just slam the door in his face. He definitely wasn't the police or anything, and he wasn't anyone official, but I got to admit that I was a little curious. And then he spoke again, and he said, "The young lassie ran up this way. Your house was the only one with the light on. She didn't come in here, did she? I parked my car in the street and she bolted." I replied no, and he swore and talked about something to do with how he'd seen her go up this way again, and that perhaps she jumped the fence in our back garden or something. And then he just left. I don't think he said sorry for disturbing you or anything like that before he just walked away, heading out our garden and back onto the street again. I think, but I'm not too sure about that. I immediately shut the door and just sort of stood there. I was certainly awake at this point. My dad is now up, and I tell him what happened. He asks if I'm okay, as I think he could see that I was pretty wired. I lock the door, check all the windows are shut, try to go back to bed, but it just won't work, so I get myself a water, and here I am, just thoroughly shaken. And I'm still racking my brain over the question of, was the man lying, or was he telling the truth? And which one of these options is worse? G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.